Good afternoon. I just want to say, first off, a huge thank you to the Growing Summit team for having us here today and putting on this great event. You've done a great job adapting to a virtual summit during COVID and a bit of these challenging times. I think it's a really important time that we stay connected as a community. We network with each other and take this time to build a solid foundation and learn from each other. So today we're going to be talking about merging legacy growing practices in a regulated market. I'm pretty honored today to be sitting with three industry experts that have a long time background in cultivation, organic cultivation. There's as well as just specifically cannabis growing. So I'm going to take a minute to introduce each of our panelists here, starting with Che LeBlanc. So Che is the founder and the CEO of Rosebud Cannabis Farm. He's got a standard outdoor facility in the Kootenays. Che, if you can take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, first off, I want to say thank you for this opportunity. I'm really excited to be speaking on this panel and along so many great experts in the cannabis industry. So it really is an honor to be here. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of Rosebud Cannabis Farms. We're in the Kootenays of British Columbia. We're really focused on low-impact regenerative production practices, as well as specific outdoor genetics. We feel there's an opportunity to the market that we can create a high quality product in a sun-grown situation that potentially go toe-to-toe with many of the indoor products on the market for a fraction of the production costs.
Thanks, Che. And next we have Shannon Ross of Community Futures. Shannon is a cannabis business transition advisor. Shannon, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. I work for Community Futures right now as a cannabis business transition advisor, and I help people transition from the legacy market into the legal market. I have about 17 years of experience of growing cannabis and about over 20 years experience working on commercial organic farms.
Thanks. And next we have Ryan Wankel. So Ryan is a cannabis grower liaison for Heliospectra, which is out of Sweden. And Ryan is based out of Colorado. He was the lead cultivator for numerous cultivation sites for Pink House Blooms in Denver for a number of years. If you can give us a little bit of a background on yourself, Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Hello, hola, hey, aloha, bonjour, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm located here in Denver, Colorado, so here in the U.S., so I appreciate all the welcome from the Canadians. I am a second-generation cannabis grower with outdoor, indoor experience from here in Denver from 2009 to 2015. During that time, I've accumulated 3 High Times Cannabis Cup awards. Also worked in multiple of the departments here in Colorado with a lot of the seed to sale tracking, which has been kind of adopted all throughout the world. And I'm just happy to be here alongside 2 industry experts. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. So the basis of our conversation is really talking about the skills and the expertise that each of you have, and how you're bringing that, bringing that into the regulated market. And I think that maybe I want to talk a little bit about the gap or the problem that we see in the regulated market and what type of solution that we see. Ryan, can you tell me a little bit about your experience on the gaps that you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, definitely happy to speak along those lines. Of course, with my specific background coming and working with a lighting company, but also, from a cultivation standpoint, I see a lot of transition, and especially, being from the U.S. and cultivation, and those transitions, kind of how it works all throughout the world. I see typically a lot of unrelated data, typically some regulations that you don't really see that gap that's bridging from the cultivation of the kind of more of us legacy cultivators to the regulated cultivation, whether it's, seed to sale transactional regulations that growers kind of have to navigate, which is different from really just kind of making sure that your genetics and that your genetic library was always intact. And now it's all about monitoring not only your genetic library, but also the whole process from the cultivation production to, post harvest to then the actual selling of the actual product. And navigating that, I think, is some of the hardest for the regular legacy growers to transition into a regulated market. And in a lot of the data for some of those, regulations, here that we see trends, at least going in the United States, that comes to regulation with lighting, and how that is kind of forcing the hand of some cultivators to then adapt and change and, change their whole system, based on some regulations that might not have actual hard data to be able to back that. So I do see a lack of actual, data being enforced in some of these regulations, and then how us, and I say us legacy growers because I did come from the legacy market, to making that transition to the regulations.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the greatest challenges is challenging is transitioning. And Shannon, that's something that you spend a lot of your time with, is working with the legacy growers and supporting them through this transition. Are you able to talk to me a little bit about the different challenges that you see and how you're able to support the legacy growers on all of this compliance and regulations?
Yeah, I think it's been really challenging for most growers. I would definitely, the regulations, most growers just grow, and a lot of people didn't write things down. And to write standard operating procedures, understanding how to write them, how to put them into practice, and doing all the documentation, it's extremely challenging for most people. And so a lot of the things that I do to help is in writing standard operating procedures and helping people with the procedures. And I have skills from the legacy market, knowing how people cultivate and the different steps throughout the whole cultivation process. And so now it's just really about helping people record keep and write everything down. And yeah, it's quite a challenge, but it's most people are able to do it, and the seed to sale software systems definitely help everybody. So that is a huge solution that I'm seeing right now.
And if I can, add on to, just add on to some of that standard operating procedures and some of the dryness. I mean, I'd let cultivators know when you're, going from, 10, 20, 50 lights, type of legacy setups to then when you're talking a couple hundred, 1,000, and then you're talking maybe some hectares in outdoor, that, this, as much as the state is asking, or the regulations is asking for standard operating procedures, a lot of this I try to is going to is pretty necessary if you're wanting to kind of keep the control of your actual product. I try to get growers to understand that SOPs are just really best practices that we've already are in placing, and whether, as Shannon mentions, a lot of that's not written down, and whether that's all in place of our head, that a lot of these SOPs are in general, I think, necessary for us to be able to cultivate high levels of product, which a lot of us are used to at a smaller scale. But actually utilizing these SOPs for tools to just better manage your product, I think is important to realize. Is SOPs are dry, and all of us cultivators, I mean, I don't think any cultivator really likes to do them, but just understanding it is best practices and trying to just really control that high level of consistency of a crop and managing that team of people that you have to count on.
Absolutely, that's really well said, Ryan. Che, so a lot of your focus has been on the genetics and the strains, and having specific genetics for your outdoor cultivation resistant to different pathogens and insects. So can you tell me a little bit about that process of transitioning and bringing those genetics into the legal system? What did that look like for you?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to discuss that. From my perspective, cultivate pushed indoors legal issues, and any other plant, an opportunity to grow outside in the sun. A lot of the breeding programs have been focused on THC specifically for production, but when we move to an outdoor scenario, those genetics don't work. Often they don't finish before the cold comes. They're not resistant to outdoor conditions, not sized. And so it seemed like a gap in the market. From my perspective, outdoor is the future of production, except for a few maybe. A good opportunity to really on those outdoors, and that's where we've been last decade now. And we're very thankful to be able to bring these genetics into them and think there's a big opportunity to utilize these genetics. We're getting high THC, 20% THC, really great terpene profiles. As you mentioned, resistance to pest and pathogen issues. And so we put a lot of time into making check all these boxes, product out, and we feel like we've done that.
Excellent. So, the government has supported the legacy growers somewhat by offering the one-time declaration in Canada, which is something that I think a lot of the legacy growers maybe are not aware of and what that process looks like. Could somebody talk a little bit about what that looks like and what the process is there?
Sure, I can.
A little bit.
Okay.
Sorry, Shannon. We did bring in a bunch of strains. We're close to 600 different genetics that we brought into the system now. So as you mentioned, there's a one-time declaration. As you transition, your license is approved, you are able to a list of genetics you're bringing in with no questions asked. And as an MMAR patient, I've been able to gather genetics in the past and continue breeding programs under that platform. And so now when we transit, I was able to move into our legal market.
This is fantastic for the industry because, you're looking at all sorts of unique landrace strains that are coming into the market, which you're able to bring in and to share. I think that's really incredible. Shannon, how on your end can you support this transition and this process?
Support the transition of bringing genetics in? Sorry,
yeah,
I don't understand.
Yeah. Sorry, how can you assist in that process? What can you offer as far as, that one-time declaration and that process?
Well, I don't know if I understand the question correctly. There's nothing that I can offer personally except for, it's just yeah, I don't know. It's a process.
Sorry, I'm hoping we can edit this piece out. I don't want to put Shannon on the spot. I thought that you guys did a bit of that, so I just want to kind of do a restart on that, and then I'll just ask if you're able to talk about the one-time declaration. Are you able to offer into that conversation?
Well, the thing is it's just the one-time declaration is what the license holder brings in, and they can bring that in from they have a one-time opportunity to bring any genetics into their license, and then after that they have to purchase from any other licensed cannabis holder. So I personally don't do anything except for helping people with their licensing. So that's,
So is this a
I don't
step
know.
that is done? At what stage is this step completed? At what stage of the licensing process?
Can you bring your genetics in?
Yes.
Well, when you apply for your license, you have to make a list of all the genetics that you're bringing in, and once you receive your license, you can bring those genetics into your facility or your garden.
Okay.
I think the thing that I see and I try to encourage, growers to look at is during that, one-time declaration is that it's a different industry that you're going into from your legacy market, who your patients and your clients that you're kind of looking at from that legacy market, or maybe yourself, then to where you're transitioning to who your customers are going to be in the actual legal market. And then really starting to focus on that, okay, where might be that gap as far as a certain chemovar or genetic that might be sought after within that specific area. So really understanding, and not just, constantly bringing in everything, but what is your, target audience are you looking for? And then whether you're looking at, going in an outdoor or greenhouse situation, as Che has mentioned, making sure that the genetics are going to work for those specific reasons. If you do a one-time declaration and bring in all of these old elite, OG cuts from, California and Colorado and expect to grow those in your outdoor environment, and you've used that one-time declaration to bring those in, I mean, it's not really your smartest business choice. So really looking at who your customers are, how you are going to be cultivating, and what's going to be more profitable for you in the future, because what you might be successful in the legacy and pre-market might not always going to work into the regulated market.
Yeah, I
Shay, I
completely
think
agree with
that
Ryan there. I completely agree with you there, Ryan. I think that there's objectives. It seems like the lead market is driven more by THC percentages and bag appeal, and THC wasn't something that came up often in the previous system. So it is something really to think about. A lot of these genetics, although they may not be appropriate, or sell well in the system, can actually be used as tools in breeding programs. And so we look at a lot of these genetics as a big toolbox full of different tools to accomplish different things.
what are you seeing as some of the greatest challenges in the market currently?
Sorry, is that directed to me?
Yeah.
I think the obstacles that we've touched on a little bit, from security clearance, that's a big issue. You can't actually submit your security clearance application until you're completely built out. So the acceptance of your application hinges on that, and that's well after you've put in all your investments, all your eggs into that basket. So that's a big obstacle. People are reluctant to do that without knowing if they're going to be cleared or not, especially considering that, transitioning from the old system to the new system, most of us have picked up blemishes, so to speak, along the way. That's a big obstacle and a big risk. As Shannon mentioned, another big challenge is the regulatory end. I know a lot of good growers out here in the Kootenays. I think their product is exactly what the customer is looking for in the legal market, but they're not regulatory experts. They're growers, they're gardeners, and it's really overwhelming to start looking at what's required in the regulatory end to make this transition. The application itself is a 300 3-page document. That's quite the binder, and it's quite overwhelming to flip through. And so it's really important to work with someone who's familiar with regulatory. I was lucky enough myself to find someone who had that skill set and as well work with Community Futures. But I think that is a big opportunity with Community Futures, is to help gardeners become regulatory experts.
Absolutely.
But
Shannon, go ahead.
well, I think also one of the biggest challenges here in British Columbia is the sales and distribution. Typically in the past, in the legacy market, the growers would know their retail or dispensary owners, and there would be a relationship between the retailer and the local cultivator. And I think that's probably the biggest gap and challenge right now in British Columbia is as a retailer, the retailers don't know their cultivators anymore. A lot of people will walk into the stores and they want to know where the weed came from. They want to talk about the farmer. Then now the retailers are just kind of handcuffed to purchasing, cannabis that comes from a liquor distribution branch, and they don't really have the ability to have that direct relationship with the grower. And that is what the legacy market was built on, is relationships. And I think that is the biggest challenge right now with how do we merge a whole culture that where all these relationships existed before, and now we have to deal with the liquor distribution branch, and it just cuts out that direct relationships between the cultivator and the retailer, and it's very unfortunate.
Che, how are you finding that transition in the sale of your product and what your avenues are for your finished product?
Yeah, it is. It's to have to find somebody in between the cultivation and the retail stores. Absolutely. Thankfully, a lot of people believe in what we represent on our store, and as well, I think our product speaks for itself. So I feel like we're in a good position. We're getting a lot of attention that we will be able to make a sale and make best use of our product. But it's really a big challenge, a big part of the issues that we're looking at here in the transition market. That's another potential to work with, community futures, and there's some other opportunities that have come up. There's a cooperative processor we're actually working with. This would be really beneficial to our whole cannabis community here, and it would also help us make that transition into the stores. I think it'd be easier to get the government to look at our product when it's coming from a cooperative processor instead of the individual cultivator, especially with relatively small batches. That's another challenge that we're facing.
I think it's really important, this time in the industry, that we really stay connected and committed to, to working together as a team and collaborating and really working through the challenges. I think as a team of leaders, really, I think that's really important, and I think that's one of the things that the Growing Summit is offering and allowing us to kind of still network during this time. I think it's really important to maintain that culture. The reason that we're legalized today, Canada being the first country to medically legalize cannabis as well as recreational. It's because of the work that was done, by people like yourself in the industry. So I think that's one of the things that really needs to be maintained. Yeah, absolutely. So, Ryan, a lot of your specialty is in lighting. There's a big transition from HPS, legacy lighting that was used in basement growing, and the lighting has really come a long way. There's a lot of research that has been done, and there's a big transition happening as facilities are now adapting and changing and doing their build outs. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's a whole interesting world, I guess, when it comes to lighting, and especially the transition from traditional legacy lighting and what we're all using, into the past to, I feel like, what what a trend we see here in the U.S., not so much Canada, but I do believe it will be a worldwide trend, is, a greener production of cannabis, lowering that carbon footprint. So here, particularly in the U.S., we have a handful of states that are adopting, different regulations that are really controlling how much watts you can run for cultivation. Obviously, there's a difference between, greenhouse production and indoor, but really focusing on indoor cultivation, lowering that carbon footprint, becoming greener as an industry, as we know that it's such an energy hog. Cannabis is very light hungry. The unfortunate thing is that I see that most of these regulations are forcing in the hands of growers, which is never really a positive sign. I mean, we've just talked about, how cultivators have came up in the background, and I think it's important that we understand that synergy, that most of us cultivators were, we were told not to do something, and we did it anyways. And I think that that's why we're in the place that we are for a regulated market. But understanding that most cultivators, not to say they'll do the opposite, but that is naturally the trend. If we did what we were told, we wouldn't be in this legal market and to begin with. So a lot of the cultivators are now kind of being forced to go into the LED market, and a lot of that is a tough transition. There are certain aspects that you have to do, and a lot of my job is just dealing with a lot of those transition from HPS lighting to, making sure you're controlling your VPD, to finding chemovars that are actually, selecting cultivars in breeding programs under LED to be grown under LED, I think is another important thing. The thing that I get most traditional growers are to understand, understanding how they grow. Most of us grew, with clones, starting seedlings under T5s, eventually transitioned to metal halide, to maybe a CMH, or you see a large now popularity in ceramic metal halide for flowering. Obviously, I would say the standard lighting of choice that we still see, and probably still industry dominant, is your double-ended HBS. And a lot of transitioning to go into flower. So a lot of what I do with cultivators is understanding that, when I talk to them and they say LEDs do not work, well, understanding where they're coming from, where they might have had failure, or a lot of misleading information, because the technology has changed so rapidly within, the past 5 years to especially within the past 10 years, which I feel like, a lot of the growers in BC and California, the really traditional growers who got into the LED game very early, kind of got that sour taste in their mouth from a lack of data and technology that assisted them in growing. But I'm really trying to get growers to understand that they're really utilizing spectrum control. You can really see that, as Che has pointed out there, you can start to find cultivars that you can mimic outdoor environments similar to indoor. But there are some things that you can't change, and that is the spectrum of the sun. So there's relations to that high blue light, say in the spring environment, from your similar to your metal halide that you'd be utilizing in your vegetative state, to then in the fall closer to flowering with your photoperiodic shift, that you are going to more of a red spectrum. So getting growers to be comfortable with understanding that LEDs are kind of being the wave of the future, and letting them know that they've been utilizing spectrum control for crop morphology kind of throughout this whole process of cultivating.
That's really great. Thanks, Ryan. Um, and as we move into, technology is changing so much, which really gives us legacy growers that opportunity to, to adapt, to um, to strive for better quality, using automation and transitioning into, the new technology that's being offered. Um, I know that, Ryan, you've got a bit of expertise on the automation as well, and how that can lead to consistent, high quality crops. I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, automation can be, I mean, most, I'd say growers have been utilizing some automation, everything from CO2 regulation, I mean, temperature control situations, but I think taking it beyond and a step further. And I think especially with, even though a lot of cannabis has been deemed essential, I think across the world in places that it is legal, but there has been a different shift in actually workflow that you have to kind of accommodate for. So, utilizing, drip irrigation, obviously, I think, automated shade curtains have been something that was very early on and adopted in the industry. But, looking for automation that's going to fit your system and how your production. And I don't think that some growers think of automation is going to be, less hands-on or interactions with the plant, and it can be, but some growers you can actually, you have to deal with regulation. You're managing a staff of employees. That automation should and allow you, give you more free time to maybe give more hands-on interactions with the crop, whether it's specking for pests or molds, or if you're, doing some sort of pheno project and giving actually more eyes onto the crop for any sort of, non-desired characteristics during your pheno hunt that could be potential disasters to your operation, to not shy away from automation, but rather utilize it to be an actual tool and resource for you as a cultivator.
Now, are you
And I'd like to add to that a little bit from our site specifically. An example, even though we're an outdoor operation and relatively simple process, there are little things that can make big improvements utilizing technology. One of the things we're using is Nat's watering system, and they have a setup that automates the flow of water. There's little soil, and they register when the soil's too. They allow water to come into the drip irrigation. This is a way to balance our moisture level, keep it quite consistent, which means healthier microbes. And this is how we grow, is actually utilizing microbes. There are little things that can make a huge difference. When you get to scale, it's impossible to hand water or something like this. So it's a big opportunity to utilize these technologies. And I agree with Ron, it doesn't really take away from your time with your plants. In fact, it's time to look at other issues that may come up with your plants, pathogens and pests and general health and those types of things.
what are you using as an IPM program, Che, on your facility? Are you able to speak about that?
Sure. Yeah, we're demonstrating an alternative to pesticide. We're actually utilizing natural. So we've got a heavy mix of poly of a lot of different plants into our production area. This creates habitat for predators. So we're really trying to create balance is the idea here. And it's not that we're looking to eradicate any certain pests. We're in an outdoor environment that's not going to happen. We're trying to create balance. And so just like you see in a healthy forest, it's balance. It needs to go in there and add nitrogen or spray any chemicals. It's about all the chips that the plants and animals and insects have together and keeping that balance. So we're creating habitat. Ours is a big thing. We've got a lot of sweet elysium mixed in the crop that attracts predator wasps, and predator wasps love cannabis aphids, and that's one of the big issues we have here in the Kootenays. So there are alternatives. There are around using these pests and things like that, and we're excited to be demonstrating that.
That's fantastic. I think one of the things that is really needed, and we constantly hear this, in the market and the commercial and the LP space, is increasing that quality and always striving to increase that quality. And I think for legacy growers, that has just been a natural goal. Is how can we just constantly improve what we're doing, whether that be through technology or growing practices, through genetics, and just continuing that process so that we deliver the best quality product that we can to the consumer. I think that's really important, that this is maintained, this information is shared, that we're talking to each other about about these different processes of what we found has worked. So I think this is really great hearing about your drying process, and being able to share that. So Ryan, you're based out of the US. Are you in Canada at all? How does that work for you?
We actually do have a branch in Canada, so we do work with quite a few Canadian partners up north. So I'm fairly familiar with all sides of the market.
Okay.
You know, and yeah, I think that, you know, with the last, you know, with the, you know, new technique of drying, I think that that's important for growers, is to just be adaptable and flexible for change, you know, utilizing as much data as you can in the industry to make, you know, proper decisions, not really, you know, obviously there's a lot of theorized and, you know, kind of techniques that, you know, we've established, but trying to apply as much science and data to the processes as much as possible to control things. I mean, everything from, you know, a new technique of drying to maybe even a new style of how you're actually transplanting, you know, 500 clones versus, you know, 50 clones is a big shift, and staying flexible and being able to adapt, but also taking some of these legacy. I mean, we see this shift of, you know, more sustainable agriculture practice, and I feel like that at the beginning of the huge rush, we saw less of that, and we saw more of these very kind of watered down commercial processes, kind of cookie cutter type facilities. And I think that we're now seeing that the market's not asking for kind of a watered down product. So we are seeing more of these legacy sustainable practices that cultivators have done for years, and then developing those to be done on a commercial scale. So also being able to adapt some of these legacy techniques and figuring out how you can adopt those. You know, one of my techniques was ice water treatments, and, you know, and on a 50 light scale and a 100 light scale, it's pretty easy to do that with bags of ice. But when you're talking about running through 1,000 gallons of water in your commercial facility, you are going to need to look for a chiller to do some of those end of production stresses, like a cold water treatment there at the end, that you are going to have to utilize a chiller to cool that amount of water. So figuring out how you can adapt those legacy techniques, utilizing some of that technology to still be able to achieve some of those high quality products and results that you're used to in that pre-cultivation before the regulated market.
I think that scaling up is definitely a challenge. And like you had said, Ryan, I agree. Just really being able to be adaptable, I think is really important. Is really important as we transition. Shannon, can you talk a little bit about some of the other, a lot of your focus, you see a lot of the different gaps in the market on that side of transitioning to the regulations. Is there anything specific that you want to talk about that you see a solution for, that you've been able to help navigate legacy growers through?
I think one of the best solutions right now is really robust business plans and production plans, and really thinking through the whole process of your business. I think that's a really important part of it. If you're going to grow outdoors and then looking at having a farm plan, and just planning is really important. And not only does it allow you to get a real good understanding of your costs, your startup costs and your operating costs, but it also helps you reduce risks. And that is probably one of the, you know, biggest challenges right now, is as you scale up, what risks are associated with scaling up. And a lot of those problems are solved if you do your homework and you can execute a plan.
Absolutely. So for the legacy growers, their first step as they transition, if they come in to see you at Community Futures, do you have an outline and a step-by-step plan for the legacy growers to begin? Because I think that's one of the hardest things is where do you start? What's that first step?
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of templates and resources that we've developed over the last year. And the first step, we always start with a business plan and a cash flow. So that is always the first step. And other than that, then we have documents that we've created, like preparing for a license, that basically just asks the grower questions that mimic the CTLS system. And that's just to have people be prepared for what they're getting themselves into.
I think that support is what's really needed, because I think it really is, it's that first steps. Once you start on a path and a road, you can somehow maneuver your way through, with the support of others who have already been down that road. I think really it's that first step that we're seeing is difficult for people to navigate through.
Yes, yeah, I find that there's it is difficult to take that first step for sure. But once you take it, most people succeed, and that's part of my most favorite part of this job, is seeing people succeed from the very beginning, all the challenges that they face, and just kind of plowing through and persevering and getting to the end. So the first step is always the hardest. Community Futures provides a lot of support. We do a lot of one-on-one support with our clients. We also bring clients together and have interactive kind of Q&A questions. And so all of those things help. I think it really does help when we bring our clients together, and there's a lot of information sharing, and there's a lot of support between the different growers as well. So,
do you work with any outside agencies that you refer or assist with, whether it be financing, lending, help with the business plan? Is that something that's all in-house, or do you work with other companies that you refer, or that the growers can liaison or lean on?
Mostly everything's in-house. So Community Futures has a lending branch, and we do lend into the cannabis industry, and that has also been one of the biggest gaps. Once cannabis was legalized, none of the charter banks were really ready to lend into especially the legacy market. And so there's all these challenges, such as, growers will need to have a fully built facility before they can apply, and the facility costs them about $350 a square foot. So where do they get that money from? So yeah, so we kind of help people from all of that. So we help people write business plans and have a real good understanding of their startup budget as well as operating budget, and then we will lend up to $500,000 into the cannabis sector for different clients. Yeah, but I guess no, we don't really recommend a lot of outsourcing with different companies, but we are like a hub and a network for many different branches of the cannabis industry, whether that be HVAC companies or lighting companies or construction companies or architects. So yeah, definitely although I don't really work with outside people, I have a kind of huge resource and network, especially in the Kootenay region. Everybody here is quite like a family. It's a real strong community of legacy cannabis industry people. So we have some of the best like HVAC technicians and people that really understand um, how to retrofit facilities, mainly because there's been so many kind of medical license holders in this region. So people have been able to experiment with HVAC systems and environmental controls and lighting for a really long time.
I think that's fantastic, Shannon. What you guys are offering, I think, is really needed in the industry, and that support, Shay, that is where you went for your first steps. Is that correct? What did that first step look like for you for transitioning?
Well, actually, specifically, I partnered with a really expert early on as I saw that was the gap. That was a set I didn't have to make a reality. And so we did have a lot of this foundation built when we came to Community Futures. That said, what they were able to help with was extremely valuable. They support a little bit of finance that made this right at the finish. During health data, we were able to get a dialogue going back and forth efficiently, and really, really they made the difference for us kind of as the icing on the cake near the completion of the project. I would certainly urge anyone else that's considering transitioning into the legal market in the Kootenays to get Community Futures. Shannon and Stacy and Paul have all been really, really great. And beyond that, you know, we want to see this market kept in this community. There's a foundation that's been built here over generations, and it's unfortunate to see a lot of that money disappearing into corporate hands and big companies when really, you know, it belongs here. It belongs in this community. So if there's anything we can do along the way to help people, we're excited to do that as well. And if anyone's tempted, please feel free to reach out to us directly, and we'll see if there's any way we can help.
Absolutely, and I think that is, you know, something that we all have in common is we want to share, you know, what we've experienced. We want to put ourselves out there so that anyone who wants to talk about that transition, who wants to network, to, you know, really reach out to each of us. Ryan, if there's any advice that you've got for the legacy growers and the transition, what is it that you would want to say to them to encourage them or to, you know, help them on this path and this transition as they move themselves through this?
You know, I think it's probably been touched on, but not trying to tackle it onto your own. You know, finding partners, doing your research and due diligence is probably going to be your best friend in this whole process. And then also just realizing that there are going to be times you're going to be discouraged, and just not letting that really defeat you. That, you know, there are hurdles there. You know, it's constantly changing. I mean, anything from you know, what products that you can use on the market. It's a ever-changing industry. So not letting that frustration defeat you, and continuing focus on what your end goal is, and also realizing that the plant's the star of the show in this whole process, and still not losing focus on that. You know, I think that's the most important.
Shannon, if you have some advice for the growers out there, what is that for them?
Yeah, I agree. It's all about the right team. I think working with the right team is really important, and making sure that you have someone that has some strong administrative skills and understanding the regulations is really important, because a lot of the regulations are kind of up for interpretation. And so if you really understand the regulations, then you can you know, really build your business plan and your business how you want to, because you can navigate around interpreting the regulations. So I think that's one of the most important parts of it.
Absolutely. That's really well said, guys. One of the things that the legacy growers have really mastered, and it is, it is that learned technique, and it's often generational. These skills are passed on. They continue to get better, and I think as a team and as a community, we need to focus on continuing to grow that knowledge, continuing to stay connected, and learn from each other. I think that is really important, and keeping that communication open so that we can really reach out to each other, and ask those questions, and know that it's going to be easier, if 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 we're learning from each other and sharing over going down this road, by ourselves. And that's really what has advanced where we are today, and that's really why Canada is legalized. It's people like yourselves, that have stayed strong in the industry, that haven't given up, and that have followed a path and a road that you really believe in. So I just really want to say thank you to each and every one of you, for sharing your stories today, sharing your expertise, and just continue the great work. And again, thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you. It was a year with you all.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure for sure. Keep it up.
And thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to be with all of you. Thank you.
I hope everyone has been enjoying the summit so far. We're going to move into live Q&A. So we look forward to hearing from each of you, and we hope you really enjoy these 2 days. Take care, everybody, and we'll keep in touch. Thanks.